And now, as I mentioned, Gareth Caldbeck is here. I met him on one alumni trip, and we've become close friends ever since. He's a published author. He has taught students and coached students at a variety of levels, but his career was as a lawyer. He speaks to you today, not, though, from his professional side, but from his personal side. And so I ask you to give a warm welcome to Gareth Caldbeck.
Thank you. Good morning. I want to invite you this morning to listen in on a conversation that I wish I had had with my 17-year-old brother. But before I have that conversation, I need to tell you his story. On April 28, 1964, I was a freshman here at the Academy. My brother was a senior, soon to graduate and go on to college. But he was struggling. He struggled a lot in his life. He contracted polio when he was young. And as a result of polio, he missed an entire year of school. He needed leg braces to walk. He eventually worked his way out of those braces, but never was able to play sports. He tried. Pickup games, neighborhood games. Never organized sports. But he worked at it. And eventually, because he couldn't run, as a little brother, I didn't make things any easier on him. And I learned pretty quick that I could outrun him. And this went on for quite a while. I'd take advantage of him and probably abuse him a little bit. I was 3 years younger than he, but he could never catch me. Even when he got out of braces, even when he tried to play sports, he just couldn't catch me. And so, as a little brother, you kind of take advantage of that. And I had for some time, but all the time that I was outrunning him, all the time he never was able to catch me, he and my mother were working on his legs, and they were getting stronger. And one day, we're outside. It was wintertime, and I did what I normally did as a little brother, got him irritated, and so, sure enough, he started chasing me again. But this time, it was different. He kept coming, and he kept gaining, and he caught me for the first time in his life. And he tackled me to the ground and got on top of me. And as he was on top of me, he grabbed some snow and started rubbing it in my face. And all of us from Vermont probably know what that sensation is like. And as I'm lying there, and he's rubbing that snow in my face, I'm thinking to myself, wow, how great is this? He caught me. My brother is getting better. But he had some other struggles. When he reached adolescence, he developed the worst case of acne I have ever seen. On his face, his chest, his back, and that, you know, as an adolescent, that's a difficult thing to go through, and that was tough for him. But by the time he reached his senior year, things really seemed to have improved. His legs were stronger. His complexion had cleared. He had a great girlfriend. He was recognized for his brilliance. He was a National Merit finalist and had heard from colleges all over the country wanting him to attend their schools. But that wasn't enough for him that day. He asked my mother if he could stay home. And of course she said yes. He wasn't feeling well, he said. And so later on that morning, around lunchtime, my mother and father were downstairs. He was in his bedroom. They heard a gunshot. And of course they ran up the stairs. And as they were running up the stairs, they heard my brother cry out, just 3 words, but they were so telling words. He cried out, "Help me, help." But of course it was too late for him to ask for help. And it was too late for them to give any help. He died. He was 17 years old. So what is the conversation that I wish I had had with my brother? As you listen to me talk to my brother, Imagine that I'm your brother, or your sister, your mother or father. That person in your life that you trust the most, that you love the most, that you know has your best interests in heart. Because I'm telling you, if that person had any idea that you were severely depressed, that you felt overwhelmed, that you were suicidal, they would say everything that I'm about to say to my brother, or more. Part of the conversation that I'm going to have with my brother is about the consequences that follow a suicide to family. I'm only going to talk about two members of my family. But when I talk about them, my mother and my father, you need to think of your family. You need to think of who in your life loves you and who you love. But it goes much deeper than a mother and father. But a mother and father's loss is probably the greatest. I can't stop you, I would have said to him. Nobody can. Nobody can change your mind but you. But think of this. What you want to do today, you can as well do next week, next month, next year. That option will always be available to you. So just hear me out. And then you decide whether or not you can wait. The first thing I want to tell you is you can't imagine how important you are to me. From when I was a little boy, as far back as I can remember, I've watched you. And I've seen you struggle. And I've seen you overcome every obstacle in your path. And there have been many. And I don't think I've ever told you what your struggles and your achievements have meant to me. They've meant the world to me. Every day you struggled, you taught me. Every obstacle you overcame, you taught me. Every time you kept going, every time you didn't quit, you taught me. But you know what's going to happen if you do this? Dad will blame himself. Your action will in his mind become his sin. And as religious as he is, he'll never again feel worthy of receiving communion, never again go to Mass. Every day he'll struggle to keep that faith in God that was so important to him. And in the end, he will not be able to cope with your loss. He'll drink himself to death. He really will have died with you, only much more slowly and more painfully. And Mom, who could have loved you more? Who could have shown her love for you more than Mom? Every struggle of yours, she adopted as her own. Every obstacle you overcame, she was at your side when you overcame it. And if there were times when you didn't see her by your side, it's because she was behind you, nudging you on. If you take your life, there will not be a day in her life where she doesn't think of you and revisit your death. There won't be a time in her life where she doesn't blame herself, where she doesn't ask herself, what did I do wrong? Or what didn't I do right? And there won't be a time in her life when even the simplest of joys when it comes, doesn't also whisper your absence in her ear. And yet, you put her through all this pain. And if by some miracle you were able to reappear alongside her deathbed, she would simply hold you with all the strength she had left and tell you she loves you and has missed you. You can't possibly think of all of this and at the same time pull that trigger. But you know all this. And I really think you care about all this. But there's something in you that's compelling you to want to take your life, and I don't understand it. But it's because I don't understand it that I shouldn't expect that my words will change your mind. But more importantly, you shouldn't expect that my words would change your mind. I'm not an expert. If you were ill, if you had been injured, would you expect that I would be able to talk you out of your illness or your injury? And what you're experiencing now, what you're feeling now is as real as any injury or illness. And you need to ask for help. I'm asking you, as your little brother, please, for Mom and Dad, for Gran and Granddad, for our sisters and for me, please ask for help. That's the conversation that I wish I had had with my brother. And the Chinese have a saying that if you live with the tragedy long enough, it becomes a gift. This is my gift. It's a gift to be able to now have had that conversation with each one of you. And I tell you, if what I will have said today encourages just one of you to ask for help, it will have been a gift for all of us. Now, some of you may be thinking, well, I'm not severely depressed. I'm not suicidal. Where's the lesson for me? The lesson for all of us is it's natural to struggle. It's natural to suffer. But we need, in our darkest hours, to persevere, to believe in the power of tomorrow to make things better. Because sometimes our days are so bad. Our days are so bad that we think our world has come to an end. But our tomorrows show us otherwise. But we need to do more than to believe in tomorrow. We have to have the resolve to get there. We might envy that person for whom things seem to come so easily. But you give us the story of someone, even if he's a stranger to us, who has set himself a life goal and has worked with everything he has to attain it, and struggled to attain it, and failed, and got up again and struggled more to attain that goal of his, and failed again, and failed, until finally, through sheer guts and determination, he prevails. That is a story that can bring us to tears, because that's who we want to be. We don't want to be the person who struggles, but we want to be that person who never quits. What sets us apart is which of us never quits. The true story of the champion is not the championship. It's the story of the countless battles that are fought between the champion and himself. I want to close with 2 poems. They're short poems. And I got to tell you, I know poems, high school, so not the best thing. But in fact, when I mentioned to my 2 sons that I was thinking of sharing a poem or 2 with you, each of them independently said, "Are you kidding, Dad?" But number 1, I didn't tell them which poems I was going to share. Number 2, they're short poems. And number 3, I have more faith in you than my sons do. The first poem is written by a great poet named Langston Hughes. And in this poem, we hear a mother. And that mother is talking to her son. And she's concerned because she knows that her son is on the verge of quitting, of giving up. And she doesn't want that to happen. So she's having a talk with him. And this is that talk. "Well, son, I'll tell you, life for me ain't been no crystal stair. It's had tacks in it, and splinters, and boards torn up. Places with no carpet on the floor, bare. But all the time I's been a-climbing on, and reaching landings and turning corners, and sometimes going in the dark where there ain't been no light. So boy, don't you turn back. Don't you sit down on the steps because you find it's kind of hard. Don't you fall now. For I's still going, honey, I's still climbing, and life for me ain't been no crystal stair." And finally, I want to share with you a poem that I wrote for one of my sons when he was in college. At a time in his life when I'm very, very proud to say he was struggling. It wasn't life or death, but it was very important to him. It was about basketball. And he was a member of a great team. But because it was a great team, practices were hard. And he wasn't doing as well as he wanted to do, as he believed he could do. And every day he'd get the ball stolen from him or a shot blocked or things like that. It was hard for him. And so I wrote this poem for him. And 2 years later, after I had written it for him, he gifted it back to me as he read it as a part of his senior speech at Duke University in celebration of a national championship. And he read it because he said he felt that it applied not just to him, but to every one of his teammates. And I'm sharing it with you now because I think it can apply to each one of you as well. It's called Standing for Dreams. Someday, a child will look at you and ask, "How'd you become?" Make sure that child listens to all that you have done. Make sure he sees each dream of yours as you fought along each day. Make sure he knows of all the times you stumbled on the way. And teach him by each lonely fall that dreams don't stoop for you. The man who stops because he's down won't see his dreams come true. It's the man who rises from each fall, the man who starts anew, the man who's asked to give his best and says, "That's what I do." Tell him he will know you're right, because that man is you. Thank you very much.